So we're back. Is our sound on? Yes, our sound is on. So can someone maybe from the chat let us know that you can hear us?
You have to minimize that thing so that people in the audience here see this.
Yeah. I'm just checking with the
Okay.
with the audience, or in this case with Tanya, whether they can hear us. Okay, people can hear us. We're getting written and visual feedback. Thank you very much. So basically now in this last session of this multiplier event, we will be showing, just click on that.
Exactly.
In this last session of this multiplier event, we'll have a presentation of another learning content block, and that will be presented by Tihana, Kraš, and myself. And then we'll have a brief presentation of a student project done by a student who completed the project, Ema Štarkl in this case, who's leaving the room. We hope she'll come back. And then basically there's this open-ended part we entitled UPSKILLS and I, where we kind of will ask you guys once again, so maybe you give it a thought, how what this did to you, what this multiplier event changed in your life, whether you can see any perspectives in using our materials, interacting with us, or whether you simply have some feedback for us. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. So basically the first part is the presentation of this learning content block. Will take approximately half an hour, hopefully a bit shorter, but we are a bit behind on the schedule, but I can guarantee that we'll be done by 5. So basically, this is not really Tihana, Kraš. This is Boban Arsenijević, who was kind enough to jump in because Tihana could not be with us today. So Tihana / Boban, take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm basically I don't take any credit for what I will present. That's prepared by Marko and Tihana. So the slides that I will present were supposed to be presented by Tihana, and I hope that I will live up to well, whatever the way she would have presented it. Not this. Okay. So yeah, data collection from human participants. If you remember from the morning now already, was not very prominent among the skills in the needs analysis. It was somewhere moderate low or something like that. It popped up in the responses or in the materials at the low or moderate level. So as such, it doesn't necessarily qualify to be a part of the learning materials and these blocks. But on the other hand, actually, it's very nice that we come now after Genoveva and Margherita, who have explained how actually also theoretical issues are very, very well suited to teach students problem-solving skills and many other skills that have figured very prominently in the needs analysis. The same holds for data collection from human participants. And in a way, actually, this area is also tightly connected to the theoretical aspects because a lot of theoretical aspects can be tested in ways of data collected from human subjects, from human participants. Also, since we have worked a lot on research-based and research-driven teaching, like if one is developing research-based and research-driven teaching in linguistics, then this is impossible without the experimental methods and fieldwork methods and corpus methods. Well, corpus methods are not part of this block, but experimental and fieldwork methods are. So this is then also necessary in that way. Finally, we expect, and that's to some extent back to what Genoveva and Margherita were talking about, we expect a spillover effect, namely that the skills, in particular those skills that are transferable from the area of data collection from human participants, will also affect advances in other area where skills needed or that figured more prominently in the needs analysis can be employed. So the content unit block is intended with the workload of 6 ECTS. It has been developed by Tihana Kraš and Martina Podboj from the University of Rijeka and Marko Simonović from the University of Graz. Thematically, it is structured in 4 parts. There is the general part that is shared by the other 3 parts, so the general issues related to data collection from human participants. And there are then 3 kind of illustrative areas where these skills are employed and where illustrative or actually ready-made material is offered. These 3 areas are morphophonology and morphosyntax, representing the domain of grammar. Second, language acquisition, representing the domain of psycholinguistic issues, and then sociolinguistics as a broad area. And also the reason why it is done this way is also because these 3 units not neatly fit the various aspects that in data collection from human subjects which are supposed to be taught in such a course. So the general part, or part 1 of the course, talks about research strategies, research designs, research methods in linguistic research generally. So it basically goes from the general methodology of science, general notions such as research questions, hypothesis testing, and so on, to technical aspects of various research designs accommodated to the type of data to be collected, to the type of questions that are targeted, but also to the type of analysis that is intended, and so on. And then research methods where also analytic methods and so on are included. Then this general part also includes ethical issues involved in collecting data from human participants. It's getting more and more complex, this area. Nowadays, for instance, it's quite difficult. Like, rarely anyone gets an approval of the ethical committee of our university without submitting 2 or 3 times. And so there are a lot of issues also with the data protection issues and so on that need to be considered in this area. And then also population sampling in linguistic research. And as I said earlier on, some of these areas fit better and some less directly to the 3 concrete domains of the course, morphophonology and morphosyntax on the one hand, where research strategies, research design, research methods can be well implemented, ethical issues too when data are collected, but then population sampling is something that is more specific for instance, sociolinguistic research, although relevant in the other 2 and so on. So the second part is then morphophonology and morphosyntax, where topics like judgment data, different types of judgments, such as acceptability judgments, naturalness judgments, grammaticality judgments, differences between them, ways of training the participants to discriminate between them, to give you the proper data, all those things that we have to do to explain the participants that they should put aside prescriptive aspects, that we really want to know how they really speak or how they really evaluate language irrespective of the norm and so on. Then types of tasks like performance versus judgment tasks, in this particular part, well, Marko will talk about it, so I shouldn't go ahead. And then also the creation of the stimuli, all the facts that need to be taken into consideration when stimuli are created, frequency, length, different aspects of complexity of the examples, possible confounds, and so on. And finally, creating an experiment or a survey. Some related aspects are involved in part 3, which deals with second language acquisition. So general principles of designing an experimental study, but now specialized for second language acquisition. Then in particular about comprehension tasks in second language acquisition and about elicited production tasks. So basically it's parallel to what we have in the part 2, where we have a judgment on the one hand and performance on the other, and also acceptability judgment tasks in second language acquisition. Then the fourth part is sociolinguistics, where the content block deals with the fieldwork stage of the research project in sociolinguistics. So how to do fieldwork, like this is quite well described area actually. So how to determine, how to find the good participants, how to informants, how to approach them in a proper way, how to talk to them so that they are not affected by your accent or by your not being from the community or by whatever social factors, social contrasts that are established. The procedure of the sociolinguistic interview, and then different aspects of ethnography, participant observation, field notes, and so on in sociolinguistic research. The learning outcomes are a little bit boring because as they usually are as a formal requirement, but they are also very important for every course description or learning content block description in this case. So what the students will be able to do after this content block is to choose a suitable research strategy, a suitable research design, and a suitable research method to collect data from human participants, targeting a certain phenomenon which we assume they are already familiar with. Still the general within the general outcomes, also they should be able to design or adopt, so design their own or adapt existing instruments to collect data from human participants. What is meant here is basically, for instance, to use the available resources. We heard Juliana speaking about it and Tanya earlier on and so on. So there are already things like PsychoPy, I don't know, and so on. Many freely available resources, instruments for collecting data which they can use to apply ethical principles. So they should be able to apply ethical principles and standards in collecting data from human participants. And they should be able to sample from a population for a linguistic study, targeting a phenomenon they are familiar with. Now, of course, that only matters when there is variation involved or any other sociolinguistic aspect. Then there are specific learning outcomes for the more specific parts, for the morphophonology and morphosyntax. The specific outcome is to be able to design a judgment elicitation survey or study, which targets a morphophonological or a morphosyntactic phenomenon that they have already chosen for their research. For the second language acquisition, they should be able to design an experimental study for each, so in the area of second language acquisition, for each of the language comprehension, language production, and acceptability judgments. And now I need to just briefly recapitulate what the parts are, because now we are getting into more details of some of the parts. Actually, Marko will be giving you a more detailed overview of the second part, and therefore I will skip it now. but there is the first part, which is general, the second one, which is morphophonology and morphosyntax, the third one, which is second language acquisition, and the fourth one, which is in the area of sociolinguistics. So for the general part one, there are 6 preparatory reading assignments, not all preparatory. That's why preparatory is in brackets. Some of them are preparatory reading assignments. Some of them are reading assignments that have to do with the particular tasks, and that are actually integral part of the learning content. There are 6 warm-up activities that are meant to introduce the students to the activities, to the actual task that they will be dealing with. There are 6 presentations with notes for teachers accompanied by handouts for students, 6 practice activities, and 6 quizzes. So 6 actual practice activities and 6 quizzes included in the material. And the same, basically parallel to that, holds for the remaining 2 parts that I will present, for the part in second language acquisition, except that now it's a little bit less items. So 4 preparatory reading assignments or reading assignments, 4 warm-up activities, 4 presentations with notes and handouts for students, for actual practice activities, actual research exercises where the students conduct their own actual research, and for quizzes. Again, totally the same parallel set of materials is included for the sociolinguistic part of the learning context, so I will not go through all of them, but rather leave the floor to Marko.
And thank you, Tihana. So basically, never gets old. So basically, I will, rather than just give you a list of items that are contained in part 2, so the part that we in class are working on, judgment tasks in morphophonology and morphosyntax, I will give you basically first the very general overview of the main. So basically, what this, we have one ECTS in this part, what this ECTS goes into, and then I will kind of show how 2 of the 3 types of items that we created came about, and what were the challenges, and how we resolved some of the issues, just to make it a bit more kind of hands-on and potentially more informative for content creators. So basically, what we have in part 2 is 1 preparatory reading assignment, but this time I will talk about this. This is really a serious book chapter that takes a while to go through. Then there were 3 presentations with 15-minute with videos, and you can see actually screenshots from these 3 presentations. They're kind of scattered around the unit, and they will be shared with you after the multiplier event. So as I announced, after the multiplier event, we will share like a package of materials that we would like you to look at if you so please, and give us feedback on. So the videos and the presentations will be shared with you. And then there is one activity, and basically the videos, well, that's as I said, something that you can look at on your own. So I'll basically focus on the preparatory reading assignment and on the activity, and tell you kind of how those came about and what's special about them. So basically, for the reading assignment, we selected a chapter that deals with judgment data, from a very kind of general book that deals with research methods in linguistics. And the challenge with this, with selecting a reading in the first place, was that there is no actual good overview chapter. I mean, if I'm wrong, please correct me, and then I'll be grateful. But there is no really nice overview of judgment data in morphosyntax and morphophonology, so kind of word level stuff. So we basically needed to take a reading that discusses syntax and kind of sentence kind of examples, and then adapt it kind of, or kind of switch the focus to morphophonology and morphosyntax in class. So that was the decision, and that is the challenge. And how we decided to incorporate this reading into the reading plan. So again, since it's not exactly giving us the the target just by reading, we decided to first start with a brainstorming session. So there is this in-class discussion of testable hypotheses from the domain of morphophonology and morphosyntax. So basically the idea is you really brainstorm with the students, okay, what are some word level phenomena that are interesting, that give us some testable hypotheses that we want to collect some data on. So the teacher can then prepare a few easy examples like plural formation in English and simple past tense formation. So really like, okay, what is productive? And there's a discussion about that. Then comes the reading task. So once you already kind of set the focus to morphophonology and morphosyntax, you say, we'll read a chapter that talks about judgments. But you will kind of have to keep in the back of your mind that we are interested not only in sentences, but also in words, actually above all in words. Then there is the discussion of the reading. Again, to pinpoint the main differences, to make sure that the students kind of got where we wanted them to get with the judgment tasks and their applicability to word level phenomena. Then comes the lecture where this is in a way summarized with, again, examples in morphophonology and morphosyntax. And then there is an assignment where the students are asked to create a couple of test items with which they can test a hypothesis that we designed ideally in point 1. Of course, that can be, they're thinking about these things might have evolved between the point 1 and point 5. So then they revise the hypothesis and then they create some items that they might want to test. So this is an example of how this kind of designing these learning materials goes. Sometimes you can't find the ideal reading. Sometimes it's not available. So then you have to kind of work around it. So this is hopefully a success story of how we integrated a non-targeted reading to our target. Then the activity that we set up for this unit in the learning content block is basically a really hands-on thing, and this is something that we didn't discuss very much in this session, but there's this general idea that teaching students how to use a tool, a technology, is a bit of a taboo. It sounds like, it's a training that they could, they should enroll in an online course and do this, which then results in the fact that, very often the students do not are not operational with some of the tools that everyone in the field uses, or at least that you require them to use. So we are kind of filling that gap immediately by, specifically targeting selected platforms on which you can set up an experiment and then pilot it and then perform it and then gain data, collect data and then analyze them. And we are looking at Google Forms as kind of the first thing that everyone thinks of, but that's the one that also has some serious shortcomings for most experimental designs. And then we are looking at SciToolkit, which is a free platform that where you can set up a more kind of seriously controlled experiment. So basically, what we provide in this activity is, so we are not just sending the students to Google Forms and SciToolkit. We create, we basically set up a toy experiment on Google Forms and on SciToolkit. We give them access to the experiment, and then we ask them to basically adapt it to their experiment. So by changing the the stimuli, changing the fillers, changing the relations, changing the type of task, whatever, but basically starting from something, because we know from experience that actually works much better and kind of leads to a much better uptake in using these tools. So basically, I will show you just some of the screenshots from this activity. The template features examples that we used in the presentations. So the presentations where we talk about stimuli creation. So this is really like just so that you don't wonder what these items are and where they come from and why they sound so weird. So basically, we tested a hypothesis about the affixes ness and ity, which both produce nominalizations, the adjectival nominalizations in English. And the items will always be either you take a word that you take a nominalization in ity, you take ity away and you put ness, so something like stupidness instead of stupidity, or the other way around, so something like hardity instead of hardness. And then you're basically wondering about the acceptability of these items in English speakers. This is a total aside, but just so that you can appreciate the examples. So basically, what we created, and then the students can, as I said, tweak this into their own experiment with their own items. So we created a word acceptability questionnaire on Google Forms. The main thing, so it says like, how acceptable does the word in cap sound in your English? And then there is like, they've had a chuckle at his stupidness, something like that. And then they can say from 1 to 5. But the main point about this is not this experiment. The main point is they get an experiment that they can tweak into their experiment for their own purposes. The main kind of challenge with Google Forms is that, for instance, you cannot actually. The one main challenge is that you cannot control how the participant moves through the experiment, so they can go back and forth. So they can basically literally go and compare your test items and stuff like that. So that's why Google Forms is not perfect. On Psych Toolkits, you have much more standard and much better controlled kinds of experiments. So we set up a lexical decision task. This is what it looks like, in the sense that really a word shows up in front of you, and then you have to click whether it's a word or not in your English. And finally, we developed a couple of surveys, so with various presentation options. So this is basically, this is a bit weirdly cut, but I can reconstruct where it came from. So basically, this is a survey with the Likert scale for the word hardity, and then this is the only item that shows up on the screen, so that you can control the order and so on. The participants see one item at a time. Or you can have something like all the items at the same time. And one meaningful activity with that is, for instance, piloting the two versions and seeing whether the fact that you can see all the items at the same time or not, whether they lead to different ratings. So this is basically just an example. But we find it a very instrumental activity to just get a grip of how to use these specific tools. So how is this incorporated into the lesson plan? Basically, now there is a preparatory assignment that can either happen before class or in class, where the students make a copy of the template and try replacing the stimuli fillers with their own items. Then there is a preparatory assignment 2, where they basically think of 2 formats that they would like to try out. So this is a bit, this makes sense in the lesson plan, because the rest of the lesson plan is then also available. So the idea is choosing between the different types of tasks. So you can have like a Likert scale and a yes/no task or something like that, and you can compare those. Or you can compare 2 Likert scales with all items presented at the same time and one item presented at a time, right? Whatever makes sense. But the students select 2 that they would like to try out. And then they create 2 experiments. For some reason, there is no plural morphology in my slides today. So they create 2 experiments using the same stimuli. And then in the end, they add the intro text, GDPR statement, they thank the participants and so on. So they have basically a full-on experiment ready to pilot and collect some actual data. This is basically the final activity in this learning content block unit, I think is what we call it. Okay, so this was us. We thank you. And now the floor goes to Ema Štarkl, who is, or I think Ema's presentation is here. Mm-hmm. So we can just continue. Oh, wait, I start. You can pause sharing. That's also fun. Nope. What? Als die snelheid.
Stop.
Nee. Absoluut. Uit het verhaal, hè?
Ja. Ja, dat moet een maken shared. So, hello everybody. I am Ema. I'm an MA General Linguistics student from Ljubljana, and I recently participated in one of the courses that already incorporated some of the materials that have been presented here today. And I would like to present my project that I worked on this course. So, the title is Morphology, Semantics and Stress Interplay in Slovene Ica derivations, so derivations with the nominal suffix ica, and my mentor for this project was Marko Simonović. And the slides won't move. Oh, okay. So I started with his article in which he addresses Slovene stress placement and claims that there is a default stress position in Slovene. And before we can tackle my project, we need to establish some terms. And so Simonović treats affixes as roots, following Lowenstamm from 2014, and also uses the term radical core from that same article. And I will explain that in more detail. And what we also need to understand are deradical and decategorial derivations and what phasal spellout is. So here on the screen, you can see two syntactic trees, which are a bit different. So in the first one, we see that the root and the affix are kind of like closely together, and then the X part, which is here presented as like the category head, comes above them. And on the right here, we see that the root is really down low, and there comes one category head, Y, then comes the affix, and then comes another category head. So what does this mean? If the root and the affix are really closely together, they are a part of what we call the radical core, the core that's exactly at the bottom of the syntactic derivation. And then when the category head comes to the morphemes, it makes it a word, basically. So what is the main claim of Simonović to appear is that this is where stress gets assigned to the word. So the stress falls on the last stressable syllable of the radical core. So in the left tree, that would be the affix, right? Because the affix has the last stressable syllable. And in the right tree, that would be the root itself, because the affix comes after the first category head, which is Y. So the first derivation with the affix would be deradical, because the affix is in the radical core. And the second one would be decategorial, because the affix is actually above a category head. And what does phasal spellout mean? This means that once stress has been assigned to a word, it cannot change. If you put another category head on and another one, the stress will remain the same. So these are the claims. So what does all this mean? This means that stress in Slovene words provides us like an insight into morphological structure of words, which is not always overtly seen because some affixes or category heads can be silent. So here we have two examples with real words. So, for instance, the first one is the word pravica, here pravic in the genitive plural, which is stressed on the affix. So this would mean that the first tree would be assigned to this word. But then we have the word žogica, which is a diminutive, and the second tree would be assigned to this word, right? This is only from observing the stress. And this is also compatible with like previous accounts, for instance, the famous Marvin account, even though she doesn't have default stress. So we have established that stress provides us insight into morphological structures of words, but semantics are also the other thing that can provide us insight to that too. So the claim is that decategorial derivations tend to be semantically transparent. So if we know what the root means and if we know what the affix means, then we can like transparently derive what this word would mean. And deradical derivations tend to be semantically opaque, which means that even though we know what the root means and we can also know what the affix usually means, the word means something completely else, right? And here we have an example from Simonović's account. So we have two Slovene words, adjectives, derived with the suffix av. And the first one is bulao, derived from bula, and the other one is blodnjao, derived from blodnja, which are both like the same nouns. The semantics is transparent. So these examples look completely the same to one another for now, but the stress is different. So here we have a stress semantics contradiction. So this wasn't like really addressed in the article. So this is why I decided to consider this suggestion, focusing on another native Slovene suffix ica, and pay more attention towards like the interactions between overt morphology, semantics, and stress in these Slovene words, and yeah, possibly figure out, or at least aim to figure out how closely we can predict morphological structure, paying attention to these three things. So my sample was, so the population was all words ending in ica in Slovene, even though some needed to be deleted. And then those were extracted from the Gigafida corpus, Slovene corpus, and I randomly made a sample from all those words, and I ended up with 583 tokens, which I annotated for stress, type of derivation, which is connected to how transparent the meaning is, and overt morphology, and I would like to present that on an example. So here on the left side of the screen, we have the word podpisnica, so female signer or signatory state, which has, as we can see, more than just one morpheme or more than just the root before the ica. And this group of words that have many morphemes before ica, I call overtly marked for derivation. And the logic is that the more morphemes you have, the more possibility there is that this particular derivation is decategorial. And here on the right, we have another group, unmarked for derivation, which only has one morpheme, or the root, before ica. But within this group, I differentiated between the words that have transparent meaning and the ones that have opaque meaning. And today we're going to focus only to the like opaque meaning ones and diminutives. Those will be our transparent meaning words from this group. So the predictions go like this. Overtly morphologically complex items will tend to be decategorial, so they will have less suffix stress if the account is correct. And also semantically decomposable items from the other group will tend to be decategorial and also will have less suffix stress. So what does this mean? The upper part that's highlighted here in the light color is predicted to have less suffix stress, and the darker red part is predicted to have more suffix stress. If we are clear up to now, I conducted like 3 statistical analyses. The first one assessed whether overt markedness for derivation, so many morphemes group, correctly predicts stress, so whether stress is on the affix or not. And the other is, does meaning transparency predict stress? And the third one is, do they predict stress better when combined? So what ended up showing up is that overt markedness for derivation does indeed predict stress in the predicted direction, because those words did tend to be significantly less stressed on the affix as the unmarked group. And this was also the case for semantic transparency, because diminutives did turn out to be really unlikely to be stressed on the affix. On the other hand, the words with the opaque meaning are really likely to be stressed on the affix. But when both factors were combined, the statistical significance really doubled or tripled. So both factors together are predicted stress much better than any of the factors alone. So this project actually brings further support for Simonović's account and to the affixes as roots account of Lovenstam and many others later, and is also compatible with Marvin from 2002, as I already said. However, additionally to stress, both morphological and semantic factors should be included into analysis of morphological structure of words, or in other words, all three factors should be considered together. Because if we now again look at the bottom example, we can actually see that the Blodnia example actually contradicts the predictions with the stress and with the meaning and with the morphological, like overt morphology, because it's actually furtherly derived than Bulau. So yeah, I will return to that when concluding, but here I would like to just quickly present what the next step is. So I do intend to test whether my generalizations are productive in the speaker's minds, for which I will be designing a reading task with pseudo words and pseudo diminutives, which will look like this. So I will use an example in Slovene language with like a non-word derived with the affix ica from, but the word doesn't exist in our language. So for instance, the medium-sized spoon that was used to make filling was called filling spoon, nadevica, but that doesn't exist in the Slovene language. So I will have my participants read the sentences and observe how they stress, and different types of derivations that I will design will provide insight into how stress placement works. And for the diminutive example, it's a bit different. I will design a non-word, which is right here is poga, and then I will derive a diminutive from it, and I will again have the participants read it. So a poga is a tool that was used in the stable. The word poga doesn't exist. Small pogas were called pogica, right? And I will see whether this will be stressed differently than the other examples, right? So I still have to mention that there are exceptions to the generalizations that I made here. So the example from Simonović's article that I used that like contradicts these generalizations is not something that should be like really criticized, but something that should be looked into more thoroughly, because there may be other generalizations that could be done within the groups that I mentioned today. And here on the slides, you can see just some of the possibilities that still need to be addressed and are waiting to be examined, because they will be left for further research. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Ema. So basically, welcome back, Jelena. Always nice to see you. So basically, this is the final part of the event, which we named UPSKILLS and I. Shall we just include it into the? So basically, yes, it is a fact that you haven't had a chance to ask a question in a while. So basically, so I'll just summarize what questions, comments, remarks can target, and then you can ask a question about anything that happened here. So basically, we are, as I said, generally interested in your feedback, how you feel about the project, whether you see collaboration possibilities, implementation possibilities, piloting possibilities, but also we've seen examples of, so we've seen this format of a student project, we've seen an example of a student project, and we've seen two learning content blocks that were presented in some depth. So basically, very specific. I don't want to create the idea that very specific questions about anything presented are not welcome. Please ask, if you're interested in why this Slovenian word, please, we are more than happy to answer. So Stavros wanted to start with a question for Ema. Okay, so basically, maybe it's a good idea if Ema comes over, because right. So I'll just summarize. So basically, Stavros, since Ema was in this course where actually I was testing a lot of the materials, also the materials for the collecting data from human subjects, which inform the step that was announced at the end of Ema's talk. Then Stavros' question was more general, so how the whole experience felt. Kind of very little simple teaching with students passively sitting, and a lot of activities and steps to perform, and so on and so forth. So did I summarize your question? Yes. Ema.
So yeah, as an experience, I guess this was really a positive experience, but it had like bumps in the ride, because usually in the beginning, like also picking a topic and everything could be like difficult, and having like to sense like what my project is about, what I will do with this project and everything, like how do I feel about this project, am I connected to it and stuff like that. I guess it's difficult on like this student level, but then I guess with guiding and with everything, with like reassurance of the teacher, which is actually in this course meant to do that, right?
Absolutely, it was my job.
You kind of get through it, and in the end, I think we all like really liked our projects, and I guess I actually, in my formal education, I had many of those experiences, because we always had like papers in our classes. So, but this one was more like thorough, and it was nice to have a longer period of time to submit it, and to actually like have more time to talk about it with the professor, and to have dedicated time to do that, because in the other subjects we actually needed to complete our paper at the end of the semester by ourselves, and just submit it for like in the exam period, for instance. Yeah.
So we had that kind of North Korean episode when we asked the student in my course when I was on the screen at the same time. But the general. I mean, I have to say that for me, I also learned tremendous lot. Actually, Petra Mishmash, who doesn't only exist in my quotes, was also in this course. So it was a course where a lot of people who are not really enrolled in the course were participating. And this is actually another thing that I discovered, with the whole business of pandemics and stuff. One nice thing is that you can invite people from all over the world to participate in your course, and some people are just happen to be interested in the topic, so they attend a lot of sessions and they give really interesting feedback. So that was also one of the great advantages of this course. But before it becomes a session about the course I taught, any other questions about anything that we said? Yes, Dragana, right?
Implementation. Sometimes it takes time to implement a new subject in the university because of the application process and everything. So is it a plan that every single university does that by themselves, with a teacher willing to learn all these things and implement them, or you have some kind of plan that you make a course which would be available for the students of different universities?
So basically, there is a question about implementation of our materials, and the idea is, the kind of bottom line is there is Stavros will answer. Yeah. If you do you mind coming over? So basically, the idea is this, of course, takes a while, and then each individual teacher who needs to implement something then has to take formal steps and so on. So whether we have something like a formal procedure that we can go through, and then multiple universities, for instance, at the same time teach the same course, go through the same procedure, and so on. And now the answer by our project lead Stavros.
Well, I'm
the
not
camera
sure
recognizes him.
I'm not sure how this will materialize in the end, but I think that the answer is that what we will be offering is a set of structured tasks, so to say, that you can incorporate in our curricula. So we'd love to have someone take the whole thing and say, okay, yes, this is fantastic, I'm going to use it as it is. But since as well, this has been an ongoing discussion among us, because we are from different universities and we have very different procedures. Like yesterday, even like Graz, supposedly you can like change a course in 15 days. Whereas in the case of Malta, you have to do it 1 year in advance and then go through like multiple steps in order to get that. So I think the idea is that since we will be offering all these materials, it will be up to the lecturers to either incorporate some of them in existing teaching, or if they want to introduce, let's say, I don't know, I would imagine that most, courses in Italian don't have a component on machine learning or whatnot. If they want to include that, then they can develop a course on the basis of our material, and like on the administrative side, it would be up to the university itself to accept the course. I hope this is answering your question. But the idea is to provide inspiration. I think that if we manage to do that, I think we've succeeded. The actual take-up, yes, we have committed ourselves that we will be using, because we spent time creating all this stuff. But then it's more on the attitude and the change of attitude that we're focusing on. And Margarita wants to
stress that we are not really creating courses.
Yes, that is.
We're creating material for the teachers.
For the teachers, yes.
That's why we have this idea of keeping blocks modular, so that you can just select that one task that you like that fits in a course that you're already given. Let's face it. I mean, we have a certain amount of time, or human resources are what they are. We cannot invest in a position and make more time. So maybe a teacher can find time to prepare 1 or 2 new lessons in a year, and so progressively renovate the teaching without having to restructure it completely from 1 year to the next, which is something that sometimes is unfeasible in terms of time.
Yeah.
So create capsules that you can integrate and teach in something that you already have.
That sounds realistic.
Yeah. So we are not, whereas the plan is for us to sort of like use these things by creating units for them, I don't think that it's the plan to, like, we would encourage people to take them on, but it's basically, take bits and pieces and whatever fits your needs, basically.
And what is really, if I may add, I mean, the fact that a lot of us come from departments of, specific languages or something like that, so we cannot have, we cannot just implement, even Margarita's course as is, because it has to be, in our case, it has to do something with Slavic. So that also kind of forces us to think of ways of implementing bits and pieces, adapting. And I think, for instance, your course, many aspects of your course can be literally adapted to, for instance, a different language family and so on. Other questions? I also had questions and issues, but I mean, not issues.
There is one.
Remarks. Petra Mishmash, and I will again repeat what Petra says.
So one thing that was kind of already mentioned by Tanya, and she kind of already indicated the potential issue. So there's a template where the student submits and resubmits according to your assessments. I imagine coming from a very traditional Slavic world that might be a problem for students who are usually used to, submitting an assignment at the end of the year, and it has to be perfect, right? So the question is, how do you deal with students, or better yet, are students okay with this, biases go along the system, or are they afraid of?
This is really a great question, which I will repeat. So I guess you guys didn't hear it, right? It was okay. Okay. So basically, Petra says basically directed at Tanya, but I also have some experience to share. So that she really likes the concept of the students submitting basically different phases and actually being forced by the nature of things to submit incomplete things. And coming at someone from this culture where if you're a good student, what you submit is perfection. Whether there is resistance by students saying I cannot fill out 1/3 of the template and project results that they don't have and write down some thoughts in something that looks like a template of a complete paper. So what our experiences are with this? Did I summarize it? I enriched it a little bit. So Tanya, would you take that question? I will also.
Yeah, I can maybe start, and then you can also end with your experiences. So I must say that the student with whom I worked this time, let's say that he's not one of those perfectionist students, which was also, I think, very interesting to work with somebody who ended up having really a low grade in the end. But the work was done, and he had a lot of fun, and he was happy to do it because he said, otherwise I wouldn't have done it. And so that was a fun fact. And so this said, he didn't have many issues submitting, thoughts and unfinished things. Another potential reason for this is that, this is somebody who comes from the Institute of Computational Linguistics, so he studies language and linguistics in addition to programming, and he also works in a company. And so working in a company where he works as a programmer, he has this, in companies, they have these short-term goals and submit. And so I think that our method actually nicely fitted in how he works more than how he studies. And so that worked fine. This said, I tried also to use this template with a PhD student, and yes, there is a little bit of this resistance, like what do I write, but not so much about perfection, but more about this forward thinking. Here is where I see most of the resistance, like how do I write about something that I haven't done before I do it. And so, but I said, okay, just try. And so then I think in the end, it did work out. But yeah, the experience is not so rich so far, let's say like that.
I also wanted to, so basically I'll just add my experience, but I was wondering about the format that you presented. Basically, the idea is the intermediate drafts stay on record, right? They're really like part of what you evaluate in the end. Right, so there are these intermediate drafts that are saved, and they're what they are, and the student just produces a new copy that remains on the website or whatever it is, and becomes like draft 2, and then draft 3, and then draft 4. But all the drafts are available at the evaluation point.
I would say that all the drafts should be available at the evaluation point. So it is a little bit like, so again, in computer science, we work a lot with these versioning systems. And so most of the time in these versioning systems, you only see the last version. And then, if you need to roll back and see what happened before, then there are ways to do it. But most of the time, you don't see previous version. So what I had in mind here is something like versioning system, but like inflated, that when you see everything that happens. And so yes, the idea is that you can see the evolution, but I think that the grade, for me, the reasonable thing is to give the grade on the final version.
Okay.
And this is at least what I said to my student. I said, that he had the freedom to advance.
Then you secretly evaluate the first.
It's good for him, and it's not going to be evaluated on how he progresses. But this could be introduced, but I didn't see the point of introducing that. I thought that it was more important that they learn, this non-linearity of the progress. Yeah, that they understand that, it's really not from introduction to, so you start with introduction and then to this, you really have to go back and forth. And that's something that I said that, intermediate versions will not be graded.
I was expecting that that there would be differences between us, but there's actually no differences because basically I'm implementing it the same way, in the sense that the idea is the earlier versions are basically your homework, and you have to do your homework, and that's part of kind of satisfying the course requirements. So I need, I need by this date, I need a first draft that contains information about these parts, but I don't really evaluate the content.
Another thing that I also said to my student, I'm not going to evaluate also the fact whether he submitted or not. So it's really up to him. And I also told him, I'm not going to be on your back, only if I see that the project is really in danger. And it happened once that I wrote to him, hey, in the meantime, like I said, the idea is that you submit every week, but if you don't manage, you don't manage. That's it. You submit when you can. And that's part of then when we have the final version, and then when we have some issues, then we can roll back and see why these issues appeared. And that could also be because, he didn't submit at this time. But I'm not there. Okay, you don't submit by Friday, -1, points. That doesn't make sense.
Cool. So there's still, yeah, I guess there are also some differences because you have this model where you do every week, right? There is a submission point every week.
This is what we managed to do 7 exchanges, and this is something that, so we managed to do 7 exchanges. The main idea was to do it every week, but it didn't happen always every week. Sometimes it took 10 days, sometimes a bit less. In the end, it took like 2 weeks, but I was not sure whether he will be submitting at all. But yeah, so that's what I said. Okay, but as an orientation point, we do it every week, but you do it when you can. So I think that Elena had a comment.
Yes, he says, in my experience, it's useful to have both formative and summative aspects in these kinds of iterative tasks because it encourages students to do things step by step. So I give students a small portion of the grade for the phase.
Yeah, that makes sense actually.
So do you, maybe that works for groups better.
Yeah.
Easy to imagine that that's exactly how it works. Yeah.
And at the same time, I think that this whole process is sort of like this. Let's pass the exam at the end of the semester. Let's give the assignment, which is perfect and whatnot. It's in this whole mentality of, yes, I need to get an A in order to be great in my studies. And I don't think that like university studies are about you getting an A or being great. It's about you learning the trade, the theory, the whatever it is that you're studying. And through these step-by-step, process, it encourages also, communication. And I think it showcases that what you're doing is not just the end product. It's actually, like what I keep telling whenever I get external students who are from different systems and they want to do a master's, and we have like a research-based master, so it's a big dissertation. They're like, okay, so I'm going to use it for the thesis. I'm like, forget the thesis. Like the thesis, even if you don't prove anything, what you're going to be judged on is the process, like whether you made reasonable assumptions, you used a reasonable design. If it fails as an like if it doesn't change the root of history or the whatever, it's immaterial. Because it's about you learning how to conduct experiments or how to do whatever. Yeah. And I think Marko agrees with what I can.
Nodding aggressively. So anyone? Yes, Margarita.
Students tend to follow.
Can you speak a bit loud, because you last time you spoke a bit louder and they could hear you. So
Our experience of these past 2 semesters in which we try to implement this philosophy, we found that students cared less about the final outcome if we created a gamified situation. So
Yeah.
what a project. We're motivating the students to run the project in an autonomous fashion as a group, we're dividing some teams, etc. And that became a very strong drive for them to submit these intermediate phases and advance in an autonomous fashion towards the goal. So, and then that is the case for Geneva, but I imagine it's the case for many universities. We have very strict requirements about what evaluation is about. So it has to be sometimes one oral exam, sometimes a written paper, sometimes a pass-fail paper with different standards.
Yeah.
So we don't have the flexibility to do, for instance, what Yelena was suggesting, or what she can do to evaluate the work in phases. But the gamified aspect of the course, you will track, so you want to see, because you want that phase to be completed so you can advance in the project. And I think it is going to work hopefully also in.
Yeah, I mean, it's
okay, so
all
we're
about-
getting feedback that people could not hear Margarita after all. So I'll just briefly summarize. So basically, also it's specific to the Swiss system that you cannot have like so many evaluation points, and also the students are not that. So there is the issue of getting the students to do intermediate steps and so on, because there is this general stress about the final evaluation point. However, what seems to be a really good remedy for that is this gamified kind of gamifying the process, basically. If I'm summarizing it wildly, just let me know. So gamifying the process and making these steps basically part of the gamification, and having them work as a team on this now stage and so on, actually makes the students care less about the final grade and more about the specific steps and kind of this local success, which then fixes the problem of the mentality of I need this grade for this exam.
Yeah.
Did I?
She was making it lifts the pressure on handing in things that are not perfect, because in the end that is the game.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if it's game, then it's okay that it's not perfect, because then they will have a phase which is going to be more traditionally framed into whatever type of exam that they will have to take for that course. So it's at least they're able to separate the two things and to advance in the right direction without that type of stress that you were describing.
So the gamification basically alleviates the stress of the final step, because if you understand, basically it's just framing the whole thing totally differently. So they kind of leave this mindset of there is this drama at the end, and therefore they kind of
Hence our insistence
more
on these
happily.
silly steps, so to say, like the leaderboard, the badges, the whatever, because it gives incentive without even realizing. Like the students don't. Yeah.
Diana says, when there are no points to gain, I joke with my students that they get karmic points for that activity.
Yeah. Does that work? How does that work?
The Chinese,
does? Okay.
the Chinese students, right?
No, there's students of Chinese.
The students of China.
So yeah, probably they also follow that.
Yeah. Peja and then Stefan.
Well, it's like some advice from you.
Which one do you mean? Because I have to summarize you, so I have to understand you perfectly. Which type of teaching do you mean?
Research-based teaching on the kind of you're promoting. So, you know, as you can say, for example, with a smaller group, at some point, you know, with this teacher, and becomes more track of the progress.
So Peđa Kovačević from the University of Novi Sad is asking basically about the role that the group size plays in this kind of setup. So you know, the danger of getting lost in a huge group, things becoming unmanageable. I mean, Tanya described literally a BA thesis. I described the course where, you know, there were like 2 officially enrolled students and then a lot of people who were, you know, attending it for pure pleasure. So then I guess we can afford much more of this really nice, you know, every week, and then I give you feedback and so on. So yeah, any thoughts on the effect of group size and how to adapt it for potentially bigger groups, right?
Tanya has
Yeah, that was actually where this infrastructure should come in. And the idea is that, you know, like when you are having individual projects with one student, of course, you can agree on the time step and stuff. But if you have a bigger group, I don't think you can have a huge group and do this. Yeah, but let's say up to 20, 25 people, I think it's doable. You can just say, okay, so we have, you know, on that and that day, there is a feedback point. And so you can just take all the reports, look at them, see where they are. And, you know, like, because you do it regularly, you also know where the project should go, and you have it. If you not, you can look up what was there before. And the idea is to give, you know, quickly feedback. So another thing I want to say, I know that feedback is difficult and takes a lot of time, and also in my experience. But this is really something that I really, I've been reassured over and over again with my experience that this is the most important thing. And sometimes, you know, one word, you know, one sentence, anything that you can give as feedback, it's already useful. It's much better than nothing. So that's what I would say. You just take your 20 documents, you go and you write something in that feedback box. And this is how you do with bigger groups.
Genoveva? Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, our experience was also, well, ideally groups of, classes of up to 20 work fine, between 15 and maybe 16. Yeah. Because then you can divide them into smaller groups. And one of the things that we also did, for example, was then not just to divide the content in the tasks, but also the meta tasks. So, for example, one of the groups was responsible for the whole project management. So they were like, okay, now guys, you need to handle the things on time, you need to do this and that. Another group was, for example, responsible for presentations. You know, how do you prepare a presentation? So actually, you could have a multi-level kind of organization, which keeps everybody in the loop all the time, keeps them active until the end of the semester. And then, of course, the individual feedback is maybe less important than the group feedback, which divides also the amount of work between the different people. So there's all these kind of different strategies that can be applied.
Yeah. Thanks, Genoveva. So I assume by nodding that you could hear Genoveva? Yeah, great.
Okay, I would also like to add, I mean, I only worked with, feel closer. Yeah, so I only worked with relatively small groups, that's what we can do here. Yes. But what I did also is to have a round where the students give feedback to each other. And I don't know, maybe that's not so much of a solution for very big groups because that almost doubles the work. Sometimes you have to look at both. But it's my experience definitely that it did make them progress. So not necessarily all the feedback was very good, but all the feedback helped them think about it better and more and see how someone else thinks about it and you know, make some progress. Yeah.
Also, I just like an experience that I had in just one course, and then I kind of abandoned the whole idea because I couldn't really, you know, figure out how I want to implement this. But I was trying to give like group feedback to written stuff. So right, a group produces something and you give feedback to this. And I realized the perception is totally different. So that's like one experience that I wanted to share. The experience is totally different. The students generally don't take it personally suddenly, right? The students that you know will generally take feedback really and get offended and not come for 2 weeks. They are suddenly because it's a group project. So there is some work to be done there, I think, but then it's very hard to include that into the final evaluation. I mean, it just has to be thought out smartly. But Tanya, you had another different point, and then Pedro wanted to say something, maybe. Okay, so let's hear Tanya. Maybe she even answers it.
No, I just wanted to comment on what Boban said, and because in my regular teaching, I also give a lot of feedback. And the students then commented on this, and then they said, oh, they were so happy that they actually got the feedback from me, from the teacher, because in a previous course, they were giving each other's feedback, and they said it was the worst thing ever. They really hated it. But I mean, it's also doesn't mean that that it will be everywhere like that. So it also shows that things are really very context dependent. Yeah. But in our experience, they really hated it, and they really appreciate to have some feedback from the teacher.
Okay.
So just a brief interruption.
No. Just I have to go because I have to catch my train. It's at 5:20 and it's 5 to 5. This has overrun a bit. So apologies, everyone. Really nice to you all, and hopefully meet again very soon. Thanks for participating. Ciao.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Stavros. We're all waving at Stavros. So, Petra, did Tanya accidentally answer your question? No, not that,
Sometimes you have one much less active.
Much less active.
Much less. It has like not dedicated. So then everything seems to find group kind of depends on participation. When you get this sort of what to do with them and they missed all the deadline. How to help them later. Because that happens,
So basically, again, thanks for the very nice specific question. So basically, in again this kind of setup, assuming a larger group, but I guess it can be generalized to any size, because you might have students who are just much less active, seem much less interested, and then kind of if you're just teaching and they're listening to you, and nowadays you can even have like the recordings of your course somewhere, then it's much easier to catch up. But here it really feels like they haven't submitted anything for a while, so it looks like really they are not keeping track what to do, and then to quote Peja, then at some point they come to their senses and they want to rejoin and kind of complete the course. What to do in these cases? Whether we have any tips, experiences?
Well, from my first experience, I only have this that for my students, I would put in the form that things were not done. I would just note that down, and so for those who never, you just note down. But then when they do, that's great. I don't see any. So that's maybe the flexibility. So that's maybe more a question for Jelena, for her approach of giving a little bit of grade. Because me, I don't grade anything before the end, because I say for you, it's the time of the course is the time for you to learn and make mistakes and be wrong and do whatever. But in the end, you have to know things, right? Anyway, you know how to get there. You have to know things, and then I'm going to grade you in the end. So for me, this is really not an issue. Whoever at any point gets to do things, it's fine, yeah. But then maybe I'll let Jelena, if she can explain it all.
And Jelena says, I treat this on a case-to-case basis. There's also, I mean, yeah, there are also these totally contingent things like how much time you have to, and you know, like the whole idea. I mean, yeah, I was also trying to think of cases, and I think it's also sometimes it's not fair, right? Sometimes you have just this impression about the students, so sometimes you do the extra, you send the extra email to remind, and sometimes you don't. But yeah, it turns out to be usually they repeat because they change something every year. So basically the students redo the course. Is that what's yeah. So yeah, but I understand Pedro's kind of concern that it looks like the kind of course where this difference between really active and really non-active students kind of grows. And then some people might really lose track really quickly, whereas, you know, in more, or it's happening in every course, but it's just more obvious in this kind of courses. That's also possible, right? Because if you don't ask for it, if you don't ask people to submit anything, and you know, you can just sit there and not get any uptake for many weeks, you just don't know that that's happening, right? Okay, it's 5 o'clock. It's amazing. So I see that there are no more questions in the room. There was another. Yes, Stefan, did we answer your question? Peja asked you a question. Peja stole Boban's question, so we'll try to trying to figure that out. Any more questions from the room? From now this time the WebEx room? No. In this case, on behalf of the Graz organization team, this also includes Ema and Jana Simic, who is not with us, but Boban and myself as well. We would like to thank everyone for attending. I'm really happy with how this worked in this weird setup with people showing up here as an avatar and then as a traveler on the train. But it was really nice. And yes, hope to see you all in whatever format you decide to show up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Marko,
Yes.
Marko, I just want to announce the next Multiplier event that will take place in Utrecht on the 4th of November. And there we will focus more on the Multiplier, on the work that we have done on the research infrastructures and research-based teaching.
Thank you,
So
Ileana.
everybody's welcome. Yeah.
Exactly.
Bye.
See you in November in Utrecht. Bye.
Yeah.